You are a burden, Silas. My dad actually smirked when he said those words, standing on the crumbling, peeling front porch of our house while my entire life was boxed up in cheap black garbage bags scattered across the dying lawn. Declan needs your room for his crypto studio, he had told me, his voice devoid of any warmth or hesitation. Consider it our gift to you, independence. That was on my 30th birthday. They literally locked the deadbolt right in my face and left me on the street with absolutely nothing but the clothes on my back and the keys to a beat-up truck. Now, exactly 5 years later, I am standing in the custom-built chef's kitchen of my $2 million estate, breathing in the rich aroma of freshly ground espresso, and staring down at my glowing phone screen. 46 missed calls. 46. All of them from the man who threw me away like a piece of useless trash. What could have possibly pushed my arrogant, greedy, and fiercely proud father to suddenly blow up my phone before the sun even came up? And more importantly, how did they find me after half a decade of total silence? I set my heavy ceramic mug down on the cold, imported marble counter and let out a long, heavy sigh that seemed to echo in the massive, quiet space of my home. The morning sun was just starting to peek over the dense line of ancient oak trees surrounding my property, casting a brilliant golden glow over the private, glass-like lake in my backyard. It was a view that had cost me years of blood, sweat, panic attacks, and countless sleepless nights. A view that represented my survival against all odds. But looking at that phone screen, displaying Harrison's name over and over again in a frantic digital rhythm, the pristine peace of my morning shattered into a million jagged pieces. My heart pounded a little faster against my ribs, not out of fear, but out of a deep, boiling, volcanic anger that had been simmering quietly in my chest for 5 long years. For the longest time, I was just a property manager. I worked endless, grueling hours dealing with broken sewage pipes, angry tenants who refused to pay rent, and endless spreadsheets that blurred together late at night until my eyes ached. The pay was decent, but you would never, ever know it by looking at my bank account back then. Why? Because I lived in a rundown, decaying house with my parents, Harrison and Valerie, and my younger brother, Declan. And I was the one keeping the lights on. I paid 80% of the household bills. I bought the groceries every single week. I paid the property taxes when they conveniently forgot. I was the invisible pillar holding up a roof that was constantly collapsing. My parents treated me less like a human being, less like a son, and much more like a convenient financial appliance. You plug it in, you extract what you need, and you completely ignore it until it breaks down. Harrison was a man who genuinely believed the world owed him a massive favor. He was constantly scheming for easy money, looking for shortcuts, while expertly avoiding any form of actual physical labor. Valerie, my mother, lived in a bizarre fantasy world where she was a wealthy, high-society socialite. She spent whatever spare cash we had on cheap designer knockoffs, useless home decor, and expensive salon treatments while the refrigerator at home sat empty. And then there was Declan. Declan was 28 years old, but he operated with the profound entitlement of a spoiled, demanding toddler. He was the undisputed golden child of the family. My parents worshipped the ground he walked on, treating his every passing thought like a stroke of unparalleled genius. He was a self-proclaimed crypto investor who spent his entire existence staring at multiple glowing monitors in his bedroom, trading volatile meme coins, and acting like he was the next billionaire tech visionary. He contributed absolutely nothing to the household. Not a single dime, not a single chore. But according to my mother, his brain was far too special and delicate for a regular blue-collar job. I endured this toxic environment for years because I genuinely thought that was what a good, loyal son did. I thought enduring the daily disrespect, the subtle insults, and the financial drain was simply the price of having a family. I kept my head down, paid the bills, and swallowed my burning pride every time they insulted my career. But my sacrifices were never, ever enough for them. The endless stream of my hard-earned cash was just taken for granted, expected as their birthright. And the real rot of my family, the true, terrifying depth of their sickness, started to show itself all because of a single crumpled receipt I found hidden under the sofa cushions on a random Tuesday. I often call my memories of that house the Museum of Pain. Every corner, every scuffed baseboard, every creaking floorboard of that decaying property held a distinct memory of blatant disrespect. That crumpled receipt I found was just one exhibit in this grand museum. It was a printed bill for a $3,000 custom gaming computer. The billing name on the receipt was Harrison, but the shipping address was specifically directed to Declan's room. At the exact time that computer was purchased, Harrison had claimed he was completely broke and could not help fix the house's failing water heater. His refusal forced me to drain my fragile emergency fund to ensure we had hot water for the freezing winter months. Yet, somehow he magically had $3,000 laying around for Declan's glowing, water-cooled toys. When I confronted my dad about it, holding the receipt in my trembling hand, he just rolled his eyes in profound annoyance. He waved his hand dismissively, sitting deep in his worn-out leather recliner like a lazy, untouchable king. "You do not understand high-level investments, Silas," he told me, his tone dripping with condescension. "Declan needs the processing power for his trading algorithms. You just deal with leaky toilets and unclogging drains. Leave the high-level financial planning to us. That was just a normal, run-of-the-mill Tuesday in our household. Let me take you to another prominent exhibit in my personal museum of pain. Thanksgiving dinner, exactly 3 years before the eviction that changed my life. I had worked mandatory overtime for a solid month just to afford a massive organic turkey, expensive imported wines, and all the gourmet side dishes from a high-end deli downtown. Why? Because Valerie insisted we host a proper, elegant holiday dinner for the extended family. I spent the entire morning and afternoon in a hot kitchen, cooking, basting, and setting the formal dining table with the good china. But when dinner time finally rolled around, Declan walked downstairs and suddenly announced he had invited 5 of his crypto mastermind group buddies over to network. There were simply not enough chairs in the dining room for everyone. Instead of making his uninvited friends squeeze in, or perhaps suggesting they sit on the living room sofa, Valerie looked at me with a sweet, sickeningly condescending smile. "Silas, honey," she purred, her voice dripping with fake affection. "You would not mind eating at the kitchen island, right? We really need to impress Declan's business partners. It is crucial for his future." I paid for every ounce of that food. I cooked the food. I cleaned the house. And I ate my Thanksgiving dinner standing up at the cramped kitchen island, chewing on dry turkey, listening to my younger brother boast about non-existent blockchain profits, while my parents beamed at him with overwhelming pride. But the absolute crowning jewel of their toxicity, the defining moment that truly showed me I was nothing but a disposable tool to them, was the Honda Civic incident. I had an old, reliable silver Honda Civic that I used to get to my various property management sites. It wasn't flashy, but it ran perfectly. One rainy Friday night, Declan demanded to borrow it to go to a frat party across town. I told him absolutely no. Valerie immediately stepped in, crying hysterical, fake tears about how I was stifling his social life, damaging his crucial networking opportunities, and acting like a selfish tyrant. Exhausted and against my better judgment, I tossed him the keys just to make the screaming stop. 3 in the morning, my phone rang. It was the local police department. Declan had wrapped my reliable car around a concrete telephone pole going 40 miles over the speed limit. He was perfectly fine, walking away with just a few minor bruises, but my car was completely, irreparably totaled. The front end was crushed like a soda can. I was furious. I demanded that Declan, or at least my parents, pay for a replacement vehicle so I could get to work. "Do you know what happened?" Valerie screamed at me. She actually cried genuine tears of rage, not because her golden boy was driving recklessly and could have killed someone, but because I was being cruel and unfeeling to a victim. "He is deeply traumatized. Silas," Valerie shrieked at me in the middle of the living room, her face red with fury. "How can you possibly care about a stupid piece of metal when your brother could have died? You need to buy him a new car to make sure he does not fall into a deep depression over this horrific accident." They forced me, through endless, agonizing guilt trips, daily screaming matches, and threats of kicking me out. They forced me to use my own hard-earned savings to buy a used sedan. And it wasn't for me. It was for Declan, because his mental health was allegedly too fragile to take the bus. Meanwhile, I had to wake up at 5 in the morning to take the public bus to my property management job. Every single day, I rode that crowded, smelling bus, staring blankly out the scratched window, listening to my father's voice echoing in my head, calling my job glorified garbage collection. I kept taking the abuse, foolishly thinking that blood meant unwavering loyalty. I thought I was paying my dues to the family unit, but I was about to find out just how incredibly cheap my loyalty was to them. The grueling weeks leading up to my 30th birthday were some of the most stressful of my entire life. The plumbing at one of the older apartment buildings I managed was acting up. Furious tenants were complaining nonstop, and my bank account was feeling dangerously lighter than usual. This was because Harrison had casually mentioned that the property taxes on our house had gone up significantly. He demanded the difference. I gave him the extra cash without asking too many questions, simply too physically and mentally exhausted to fight another battle. I just wanted to reach my birthday weekend, grab a cheap steak from the grocery store, and sleep for 12 uninterrupted hours. It was a gloomy Tuesday afternoon. I came home early because a flaky plumbing contractor had canceled on me at the last minute. The house was dead quiet. Harrison was supposedly out pretending to look for executive-level work. Valerie was at a high-end salon getting a manicure she absolutely could not afford, and Declan was probably out driving the very car I had bought for him. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water and noticed a massive pile of unopened mail shoved carelessly onto the corner of the counter. Normally, I completely ignored it, but a thick, official-looking envelope from a major national bank caught my eye. It had a bright red, bolded urgent stamp printed across the front. I do not know exactly why, but my stomach instantly dropped. Call it a survival instinct. Call it a gut feeling cultivated by years of living with liars. I reached out and tore the envelope open. I stood in the dead center of the kitchen, reading the thick legal document once, twice, 3 times. The complex financial words started to blur together on the page. It was a formal notice regarding a second mortgage. My parents had secretly, without breathing a single word to me, taken out a massive second mortgage on the house. The very same house I was pouring my blood, sweat, and entire paycheck into paying off month after month. The bolded loan amount at the bottom of the page made my knees physically weak. $150,000. Attached to the formal notice was a detailed summary of the disbursed funds. The entire $150,000 had been wired directly to an offshore, unregulated cryptocurrency exchange account. The account name listed on the wire transfer? Declan. They had mortgaged the physical roof over my head. They had risked the home I solely funded, taking on a mountain of debt, all to gamble on Declan's imaginary, highly volatile crypto empire. And they never said a single solitary word to me. While they were bleeding me dry for basic grocery money, complaining about the cost of electricity, and begging for property tax help, they were sitting on a massive, hidden pile of borrowed cash, blowing it on digital garbage. I realized in that quiet, suffocating moment that I was not a son to them. I was not even a roommate. I was a human ATM machine, a beast of burden, and they didn't even respect me enough to tell me they were systematically destroying the bank. If you have ever been stabbed in the back by your own flesh and blood, especially over money, drop the word 1 in the comments right now. You know exactly the kind of suffocating, world-shattering betrayal I was feeling in that moment. My chest felt incredibly tight, like a steel band was being ratcheted around my ribs. The air in the kitchen suddenly felt far too thick to breathe. All those years of eating cold food in the kitchen, all those freezing mornings waiting for the bus, all the condescending insults about my job from a man who was secretly drowning us in debt. It all rushed to the surface, forming a tight, painful, burning knot in my throat. They were laughing at me behind my back. They were actively using my financial stability to fund their reckless delusions. My hands shook with a rage I had never experienced before. I took a clear picture of the document with my phone. I carefully folded the heavy paper, put it deep in my jacket pocket, and sat at the kitchen table. I waited in the silence. I was going to confront them. I was going to lay this piece of paper flat on the table, look them in the eyes, and demand every single penny back. I was ready to tear the entire house down to its foundations with that piece of paper. I marched home on the late afternoon of my 30th birthday, ready for an absolute war. But what I actually found waiting for me was a nightmare I never, ever saw coming. I did not even get the chance to confront them on my own terms. 2 agonizing days later, my actual 30th birthday arrived. I had spent those 48 hours boiling with a quiet, dangerous rage, playing out the confrontation in my head over and over again, planning exactly what I was going to say to shatter their smug reality. I left work a little early that afternoon, the printed photo of the mortgage document burning a metaphorical hole in my jacket pocket. I was fully prepared to drop the bomb and watch the fallout. But as I turned my beat-up, sputtering truck onto our familiar suburban street, I immediately slowed down. Something was terribly wrong. My truck idled in front of the house, the engine coughing, as I stared blankly at the front lawn. Black trash bags, dozens of them, scattered haphazardly across the dying, unwatered grass. Alongside the cheap plastic bags were my college textbooks, my heavy winter coats, my favorite boots, and my desktop monitor. My entire life, everything I owned in the world, was sitting in the dirt like a pile of discarded refuse. I put the truck in park, my hands trembling on the steering wheel, and stepped out. My boots crunched loudly on the gravel driveway. My mind simply could not process what my eyes were seeing. As I walked closer, the heavy wooden front door swung open, and out stepped Harrison, Valerie, and Declan. They stood shoulder to shoulder on the elevated porch like a united front, like a firing squad waiting for the prisoner. "What is this?" I asked, my voice dangerously low, almost a whisper, as I pointed to the bags. Harrison crossed his arms over his chest, leaning casually against the wooden railing. "We are making some necessary changes around here, Silas. Declan's investments are entering a highly crucial phase. The market is shifting. He needs a proper, dedicated command center. Your room is the biggest in the house, so we are repurposing it." I looked at the trash bags, then back up at them. "You are repurposing my room. So where exactly am I supposed to sleep tonight?" Valerie stepped forward, clutching her fake pearl necklace, her face twisted into a mask of faux sympathy. "Oh, honey, it is definitely time for you to fly the nest. You are 30 years old today. Happy birthday. It is completely unnatural for a man your age to still be leeching off his poor parents. You need to grow up." "Leeching?" I repeated, the word tasting like bitter ash in my mouth. "Leeching? I pay the mortgage you just doubled. I pay the electric bill. I buy the food you are digesting right now." Declan snorted loudly, leaning arrogantly against the doorframe, carelessly twirling his expensive smartphone in his hand. "That is called rent, you idiot. You have been paying basic rent. And now the landlords are formally terminating your lease. Don't be so incredibly dramatic, bro. Just pack it up." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folded, printed photo of the secret mortgage document. I held it up high in the fading afternoon light, my hand perfectly steady now. "Rent?" I yelled, my voice cracking like a whip with pure, unfiltered fury. "Is this rent too? 150 grand leveraged against the house to fund your fake, scam internet coins?" For a split second, Harrison's smug, immovable expression dropped. Valerie gasped loudly, her hand flying to cover her mouth in genuine shock. But Declan? Declan just rolled his eyes, entirely unbothered. "Yeah, and?" Declan sneered, shrugging his shoulders. "Takes big money to make big money. That is a concept a glorified janitor like you would never, ever understand." I looked at my father. I looked hard at the man who was supposed to protect me, guide me, and teach me how to be a man. He quickly recovered his smirk, standing taller, puffing out his chest. "You are a burden, Silas. You constantly drag down the high energy of this family with your small-minded poverty thinking. Consider this eviction our gift to you, true independence. Now grab your garbage and get off my property before I call the local police and have you arrested for trespassing." They locked the deadbolt. Click. Right on my birthday. I did not cry. I did not drop to my knees and beg them to let me stay. The white-hot anger inside me burned so intensely it instantly incinerated any sadness or grief I might have felt. I silently, methodically loaded the heavy black bags into the dirty bed of my truck. I did not look at the house again. I got in, put the truck in drive, and drove away from the only family I had ever known, staring into the rearview mirror as their house disappeared into the distance. Where the hell was I supposed to go now? I ended up driving aimlessly for an hour before pulling into a dilapidated roadside motel, right off the noisy interstate highway. It was the kind of depressing place where the neon vacancy sign constantly buzzed and flickered, casting a sickly, pulsating red glow through the incredibly thin, stained curtains of the room. I spent the evening of my 30th birthday sitting alone on a sagging mattress that smelled heavily of old cigarette smoke and despair, eating a cold, prepackaged turkey sandwich I bought from a gas station across the street. I stared blankly at the yellowing water stains on the ceiling, listening to the massive 18-wheeler trucks roar past on the highway, shaking the cheap glass of the motel window. I checked my banking app. I had exactly $42 left in my checking account. My once healthy emergency fund was entirely gone, thoroughly drained by the emergency water heater repair and the inflated property taxes I had foolishly paid for a house I was just kicked out of. I was officially, undeniably homeless. The next morning, I refused to let the world stop spinning. I went to work. I changed into my uniform in the cramped, dirty bathroom of a local diner, violently splashing freezing cold water on my face to try and hide the massive, dark purple circles under my eyes. When I finally walked into the bright, modern property management office, I must have looked like a walking corpse. My boss was a woman named Naomi. Naomi was an absolute legend in the local commercial real estate scene. She was incredibly tough, razor-sharp, and absolutely did not tolerate excuses, laziness, or self-pity from anyone on her payroll. She noticed my horrific appearance immediately. She called me into her large, glass-walled office, told me to sit down, and firmly shut the door behind us. "You look like you got run over by a freight train, Silas. What is your problem?" she demanded, crossing her arms over her tailored suit, her eyes narrowing as she assessed me. I broke down, not weeping, not sobbing, but the massive emotional dam holding back my frustration, anger, and humiliation finally cracked open. I told her everything: the unpaid bills I covered, the secret offshore mortgage, the horrific Thanksgiving dinners, the totaled car, and finally, the black trash bags on the lawn. I told her I was currently living out of my truck and a cheap, dangerous motel. Naomi did not offer pity. She did not pat my shoulder, offer me a tissue, or tell me that everything happens for a reason and it would all be okay. Instead, she opened her heavy oak desk drawer, reached inside, and tossed a heavy brass key onto the table. It clattered sharply against the wood. "That is the master key to the basement storage unit in our downtown apartment complex," she said flatly, her voice entirely devoid of emotion. "There is a small, functional bathroom down there and enough space for a folding cot. It is not pretty. It is dusty. But it is warm, it is out of the rain, and it is safe. And there is no rent." I stared at the brass key, completely stunned by the gesture. "Naomi, I do not know how to possibly repay you for this." She leaned heavily over her desk, her piercing eyes locking onto mine with terrifying intensity. "You repay me by working 3 times as hard as you did yesterday. You stop being a pathetic victim right now. Real estate is a brutal, unforgiving game, Silas. Your family used real estate to leverage you and crush you. I am going to teach you how to use it to absolutely crush them." I took the key. That night, sitting on a cheap, uncomfortable folding cot in a windowless concrete basement, surrounded by towering, dusty boxes of old maintenance files, I made a silent, unbreakable oath. I was not just going to survive this. I was going to build an empire. I was going to amass the kind of staggering, undeniable wealth that would make Harrison and Valerie choke on their own toxic greed. I was done being a punching bag for failures. I had the keys to a basement and a raging fire in my gut that was going to burn my old life to ashes. But how exactly do you go from sleeping on a concrete floor to building a multimillion-dollar empire? The next 4 years of my life were a dizzying, exhausting blur of cheap caffeine, complex financial spreadsheets, and choking on drywall dust. I practically lived at the main office during the day and my concrete basement unit at night. I was consistently clocking in 100-hour work weeks without breaking a sweat or complaining once. Naomi kept her word to the letter. She threw me headfirst into the deep end of the commercial and residential real estate market. She taught me how to spot deeply distressed properties that others ignored, how to ruthlessly negotiate with desperate, impatient banks, and how to rigorously manage shady contractors without getting ripped off. While my arrogant brother Declan was sitting comfortably in his stolen, repurposed bedroom, intensely watching red and green candles fluctuate on a crypto chart, praying to the universe for a digital miracle, I was out in the real world doing the actual heavy lifting. I saved every single penny that crossed my palms. I ate plain rice and cheap canned beans for months. I wore the same 3 durable work shirts until they were threadbare. When I finally scraped together a hard-earned $5,000 in leasing commissions, Naomi co-signed a high-interest hard money loan for me. I bought my very first property, a disgusting, abandoned, bank-owned foreclosure that smelled terribly of black mold, pet urine, and bad life decisions. I spent every single night after my grueling day job physically tearing out rotten floorboards, hauling heavy debris, and painting walls until my hands literally bled and blistered. I poured my soul into that house. I flipped that terrible property in exactly 3 months and turned my initial $5,000 investment into a clean $50,000 in pure profit. I didn't buy a watch. I didn't buy a car. I did it again and again. I rolled every single cent of profit into the next bigger deal. 50,000 quickly became 200,000. 200,000 became a robust portfolio of multifamily rental properties generating massive, consistent passive income every month. I was a relentless machine. I had absolutely no social life, no expensive hobbies, no romantic distractions. My only fuel, the only thing keeping me awake at 2 a.m. while analyzing property taxes, was the vivid memory of those black trash bags sitting on the front lawn. And the beautiful, poetic, ironic part of it all? I discreetly tracked my family's financial status from a distance through public county records. Declan's highly leveraged crypto investments had tanked hard. The entire altcoin market crashed violently, wiping out his imaginary digital fortune completely overnight. The massive second mortgage my parents took out to fund his stupidity was now a massive, heavy iron anchor dragging them deep underwater. They were actively drowning in mounting debt, desperately trying to refinance a house that was rapidly falling apart because the guy who used to fix the pipes and patch the roof was gone. I was no longer the broke, exhausted kid taking the city bus. I was a highly successful, self-made real estate developer. I drove a sleek, paid-off black SUV. I wore perfectly tailored suits to high-stakes zoning meetings with city planners. I was rapidly becoming a wealthy ghost they wouldn't even be able to recognize on the street. And my biggest, most satisfying move was just over the horizon. Year 5 was the definitive turning point in my trajectory. I had successfully established my own independent development firm, frequently partnering with Naomi on massive, 8-figure commercial deals. I was wealthy. Not just comfortable, not just doing well, but genuinely, undeniably wealthy. And it was finally time to buy a real home for myself. No more basements, no more living in flipped houses during renovations. I wanted a permanent fortress. I found it on the quiet, exclusive outskirts of the city. A sprawling, breathtaking $2 million estate sitting perfectly on 10 acres of pristine, wooded land. It featured a private, stocked lake, a massive wrought iron gated entrance, and a long winding driveway lined with ancient, towering oak trees. The house itself was a modern architectural masterpiece constructed of floor-to-ceiling glass, steel, and warm natural stone. When I sat at the mahogany table to sign the closing papers, my hand did not shake even a millimeter. I paid a massive down payment entirely in cash, securing the rest with a highly favorable rate. The absolute sweetest part of the deal? The ironic link that made me smile every single time I thought about it. The prestigious bank that eagerly originated the massive loan for my estate, the very bank that treated me like VIP royalty and offered me espresso in their executive suite, was the exact same financial institution that held the deeply underwater mortgage on my parents' crumbling suburban house. I knew, through my extensive industry connections and public notices, that my parents were now over 3 months behind on their payments. The bank was actively preparing to formally foreclose on them, while simultaneously serving me imported champagne to celebrate my new purchase. I spent my first entire month in the estate just soaking in the profound silence. I would sit out on the expansive balcony of my master bedroom in the early mornings, drinking expensive coffee, looking out over the calm water, feeling a deep, resonating sense of victory that words simply cannot adequately describe. I had won. I had thoroughly beaten them at their own ruthless game without ever needing to speak a single word to them in 5 years. Until this very morning, I stood in my massive kitchen, staring down at the glowing screen showing 46 missed calls from Harrison. I had intentionally never changed my phone number, purely out of spite. I wanted to be a ghost, but I left the digital line open just in case they ever reached rock bottom and tried to violently crawl back. I took another slow sip of my coffee. The phone aggressively vibrated again in my hand. A text message notification popped up on the screen. It was not from my father. It was from Aunt Beatrice. Beatrice was the biggest, most toxic gossip in our entire extended family. A bitter woman who acted as a loyal flying monkey for my mother whenever Valerie needed to spread drama or manipulate a situation. I swiped open the text. The harsh words on the screen made my blood run instantly, freezing cold. "You disgusting, ungrateful brat," the message read. "Your family is literally starving, they are losing their home today, and you are out there living like a king in a mansion? Valerie is absolutely devastated. We know exactly where you are. We are coming over right now to get what rightfully belongs to the family." I gripped the cold edge of the marble counter, my knuckles turning white. How on earth did they find out where I lived? I stood frozen in the center of my massive kitchen, the cold edge of the marble island pressing hard into my palms. My mind raced, trying to piece together how the impenetrable wall I had built around my new life had suddenly crumbled. For 5 years, I had been an absolute ghost to them. I had intentionally kept my personal address off all public business registries, using a secure corporate P.O. box for everything. So how did Aunt Beatrice, of all people, know about my $2 million estate? The answer came to me with a sickening realization. Monty. Monty was the senior real estate broker who had facilitated the purchase of my estate. He was a good guy, but he had an ego the size of a blimp and loved to brag about his high-profile clients. A few weeks ago, Monty had done a featured interview for a regional luxury lifestyle magazine. He had proudly highlighted his biggest recent sale, practically boasting about the young, self-made property developer who paid a massive cash down payment for the coveted lakefront estate. He had used my full name. He had included a beautiful, glossy aerial photograph of the property. Aunt Beatrice, who spent her miserable days sitting in waiting rooms and gossiping at hair salons, must have picked up that exact magazine, seen my name, and immediately called my mother. The security of my silence was gone. I looked down at my phone again. The 46 missed calls from my father were no longer just an annoyance. They were a blaring siren of incoming chaos. I set my coffee mug down and decided to listen to the voicemails. I needed to know exactly what kind of delusion I was dealing with. I pressed play on the first message, left at 2 in the morning. "Silas, pick up the phone right now." Harrison's voice barked through the speaker, thick with his usual unearned authority. "Your mother is having a nervous breakdown. We know about the lake house. You have a lot of explaining to do, boy. Call me back the second you get this. We are family, and we need to have a serious financial meeting." I deleted it and skipped ahead to message number 20, left around 4 in the morning. The tone had drastically shifted. It was Valerie this time, her voice trembling with that sickening, manipulative fake crying she used to employ whenever she wanted me to drain my savings for Declan. "Oh, Silas, my sweet boy," Valerie sobbed into the receiver. "Please answer. We are in so much trouble. Declan's investments failed. The market manipulated him, honey. It wasn't his fault. And the terrible bank is taking our house today. We have nowhere to go. We are your parents. You cannot leave us out on the street. We forgive you for running away. Just let us come stay at your new place for a few months. Please, Silas." I felt my stomach churn. She forgave me? They locked me out on my 30th birthday, threw my belongings in the dirt, and she had the nerve to say she forgave me for running away? The sheer, unadulterated narcissism was breathtaking. I skipped to the very last voicemail, left just 20 minutes ago. It was Harrison again, but this time the fake authority and the manipulative crying were entirely gone. What replaced them was pure, venomous desperation. His voice was breathless, raspy, and filled with a frantic rage that genuinely unsettled me. "Listen to me, you ungrateful little parasite," Harrison hissed. "You think you can hide in some luxury mansion while your own flesh and blood gets thrown onto the street? We gave you life. You lived under my roof for 30 years. You ate my food. You used my house as a free hotel while you hoarded your little paychecks. Whatever money you used to buy that estate, a massive portion of it rightfully belongs to us. That house is a family asset. Silas, do you hear me? It is a family asset. We are packing our things right now. You are going to open those gates, or I swear to God I will drag your name through the mud until you have nothing left." The voicemail clicked off, leaving my kitchen in a heavy, suffocating silence. A family asset. The sheer audacity of those words echoed in my head. They had drained my bank accounts, destroyed my credit, forced me to buy cars for a spoiled adult toddler, and secretly mortgaged the roof over my head to fund a crypto scam. And now, as the consequences of their own horrific actions finally caught up to them, they genuinely believed they had a legal and moral right to the empire I built with my bare hands. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was not a call. It was an automated alert from my estate's smart security system. Motion detected at the main front gate. I pulled up the live camera feed on my phone screen. There they were. My father's beat-up, sputtering sedan. The same car I had been forced to fix countless times, was idling aggressively right up against my reinforced steel security gate. Harrison was out of the car, violently pushing the intercom button over and over again, his face red and contorted with rage. Valerie was standing next to him, dramatically holding a tissue to her face, looking up at the security camera as if she were auditioning for a tragic movie role. And slouched in the back seat, staring blankly at his phone, was Declan. They looked terrible. Harrison had aged 10 years, his posture hunched, his clothes wrinkled and unwashed. Declan looked pale and sickly, the arrogant glow of his crypto bro persona entirely evaporated. They looked exactly like what they were, drowning people desperately looking for someone to drag down with them. I did not feel fear. The scared, obedient 30-year-old property manager who used to take their abuse was dead and buried. I took a deep breath, slipped my phone into my tailored trousers, and walked out the front door. It was time to finally face the ghosts of my past. The morning air was crisp and cool as I walked down the long, winding driveway toward the main gate. The gravel crunched steadily under my expensive leather shoes. I took my time. I wanted them to see the vast expanse of my property. I wanted them to look at the manicured lawns, the towering ancient oaks, and the glimmering surface of the private lake. I wanted them to deeply understand the massive, unbridgeable gulf that now existed between my reality and theirs. As I approached the heavy wrought iron gate, Harrison spotted me. He immediately gripped the metal bars, his knuckles turning white, and began shaking the gate as if he could somehow force it open with his bare hands. "Silas, open this damn gate right now," Harrison barked, his voice echoing loudly in the quiet neighborhood. "We have been sitting out here like criminals. Open it." I stopped about 10 feet away from the gate, keeping the thick steel barrier firmly between us. I slid my hands into my pockets and looked at them. I did not say a word. I just stared, letting the silence stretch out, forcing them to squirm under my cold, unblinking gaze. Valerie pushed past Harrison, pressing her tear-stained face against the bars. "Silas, honey, please. We are exhausted. The bank locked us out this morning. The sheriff was there and everything. It was humiliating, just incredibly humiliating. We have all our bags in the trunk. Just open the gate so we can get settled in a guest room. We can talk about everything over breakfast. I am so hungry, sweetie." I looked at my mother. I looked at the fake designer handbag slung over her shoulder, a bag she had probably bought with the grocery money I used to give her. "There are no guest rooms for you here, Valerie," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and entirely devoid of any affection. Harrison's face turned a violent shade of purple. "Do not speak to your mother that way," he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me through the bars. "You owe us, Silas. Do you understand? We raised you. We sacrificed our best years to put a roof over your head." "You kicked me out on my birthday," I replied, my tone dangerously flat. "You threw my entire life into garbage bags on the front lawn because you needed a room for your golden child to gamble away borrowed money." Declan finally rolled down the back window of the sedan, poking his head out. "Bro, let it go. Seriously, you are holding onto the past like a bitter loser. We made a strategic error with the crypto market. It happens to the best investors. We just need a place to crash for a few months until I secure a new round of funding. You have a giant mansion. Stop being so incredibly selfish." I actually laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound that seemed to startle all three of them. "Selfish?" I shook my head, walking a few steps closer to the gate. "You want to talk about selfish, Declan? You wrapped my only car around a telephone pole and then whined until I drained my savings to buy you a new one. You stole $150,000 of equity out of a house that I was paying for. That was our house," Harrison roared, spitting as he yelled. "You were just a tenant, and a cheap one at that. You hoarded your money while living under my roof. By all legal metrics, the money you saved while living with us belongs to this family. You used our resources to build your little real estate business. Therefore, this estate is a family asset. We have a 50% equity claim on everything you own, Silas. You are going to let us in, or I swear to God, we will take you to court and take half of everything." The sheer delusion was almost fascinating to witness. He truly believed it. He had convinced himself that my hard work, my sleepless nights, and my extreme sacrifices were somehow his own brilliant investments. "You have a claim on nothing," I said, leaning slightly closer to the bars. "You are bankrupt. You are desperate. And you are standing outside my property looking like the trash you threw on the lawn 5 years ago." Valerie let out a loud, dramatic wail, sliding down the metal bars to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably. "Silas, how can you be so cruel? We are your family. We will die on the streets. You should have thought about that before you handed your home over to a crypto scammer," I said, glancing at Declan, who suddenly looked very small in the back seat. "This is your final warning, Silas," Harrison growled, his voice dropping to a menacing pitch. "You either open this gate right now and welcome us in, or I will destroy you. I will call every newspaper. I will tell everyone how you abandoned your elderly parents to die in poverty while you live like a king. I will ruin your reputation in this city. You will never do business here again." I looked my father dead in the eye, feeling an overwhelming sense of peace wash over me. The monster that used to terrify me was just a sad, loud, powerless old man. "Do whatever you have to do, Harrison," I said softly. "But if you touch my gate one more time, or if you park this piece of junk car on my property line for one more minute, I will have the police arrest you for trespassing. Consider this my gift to you, true independence." I turned my back on them and began walking slowly up the long driveway. Harrison started screaming, rattling the gate so hard it clanged against the concrete pillars. Valerie was wailing my name. I did not look back, not once, but as I walked into my beautiful, quiet house and locked the heavy oak door behind me, I knew this was not over. Harrison was a cornered, desperate animal, and cornered animals always try to bite. I knew Harrison would try to retaliate, but I severely underestimated the sheer speed and viciousness of his smear campaign. By the time I woke up the next morning, my phone was a disaster zone of frantic notifications. It started with the flying monkeys, the extended relatives, the bitter family friends, and the busybody neighbors who lived for drama. Aunt Beatrice had been the first to strike. She had composed a massive, multi-paragraph essay on Facebook, tagging dozens of people in our local community. She painted a horrifying, entirely fabricated picture of my life. She wrote that I had systematically stolen my parents' retirement funds, tricked them into signing away the deed to their house, and then abandoned them on the streets to buy myself a luxury megamansion. She called me a sociopath. She called me an elder abuser. She attached the glossy photo of my estate from the real estate magazine, contrasting it with a pitiful photo of my parents sitting on suitcases at a cheap bus stop. The post had hundreds of shares within hours. The comments were a cesspool of outrage. People who hadn't spoken to me since high school were publicly calling for my arrest. Distant cousins were sending me direct messages, calling me a monster and demanding I turn over the keys to my house. But the social media circus was just the beginning. The real damage started when the rumors breached my professional life. Real estate is a business built entirely on trust, reputation, and perceived stability. By noon, 2 of my most reliable private investors had called Naomi, asking nervous questions about my legal status and whether my assets were tied up in family litigation. A major commercial zoning deal I had been working on for 6 months was suddenly put on hold by the city council, citing concerns about community pushback due to the viral allegations. Harrison was making good on his threat. He was actively trying to burn my empire to the ground out of pure spite. I drove into the city and walked straight into Naomi's office. She was already pacing behind her glass desk, reading the Facebook posts on her tablet, her jaw clenched tight. "This is a coordinated hit job, Silas," Naomi said, tossing the tablet onto the desk. "Your father is a relentless parasite. He knows he cannot win, so he is trying to inflict as much economic damage as possible, hoping you will pay him a massive settlement just to make the bad press go away." I sat down in the leather chair, rubbing my temples. "It is working, Naomi. The investors are spooked. If we lose the zoning deal, that is a $4 million project down the drain. Should I release a statement? Should I post the mortgage documents online to prove they ruined themselves?" Naomi slammed her hands on the desk, leaning forward. "Absolutely not. Never, ever argue with a pig in the mud, Silas. You both get dirty, and the pig likes it. You do not fight a battle of public opinion with desperate liars. You fight them in an arena where their lies have devastating, permanent consequences." She picked up her desk phone and dialed a number from memory. She looked at me with a cold, predatory smile. "I am calling Sullivan." Sullivan was the most feared, high-powered corporate litigator in the state. He was not a cheap lawyer. He was a shark who charged astronomical fees because he never lost. 30 minutes later, we were sitting in Sullivan's penthouse office, surrounded by walls of expensive legal books and panoramic views of the city skyline. I handed Sullivan the printed screenshots of Aunt Beatrice's posts, the threatening voicemails from Harrison, and, most importantly, the original photos of the second mortgage documents detailing the $150,000 wire transfer to Declan's crypto account. Sullivan was a quiet, intense man. He read through every single page meticulously, his face an unreadable mask. When he finally finished, he neatly stacked the papers on his mahogany desk, folded his hands, and looked at me. "Your father is demanding 50% equity in your estate under the delusion that your savings constitute a family asset," Sullivan stated, his voice smooth and calculating. "Furthermore, he is engaging in coordinated, malicious defamation to extort a settlement." "Yes," I replied, my voice tight. "I just want a cease and desist. I want them to leave me alone. I want a restraining order." Sullivan chuckled. "A dark, dry sound. A cease and desist is a piece of paper, Silas. These people do not respect boundaries. If you simply warn them, they will slink back into the shadows and continue poisoning your name through whispers. No, we are going to do something much more effective. We are going to let them sue you." I stared at him, bewildered. "Let them sue me? That is exactly what I am trying to avoid. The investors will run for the hills if I am tied up in a massive lawsuit." "Trust the process," Naomi interjected, a knowing smile playing on her lips. "When they file a lawsuit," Sullivan explained, leaning back in his expensive chair, "they open the door to legal discovery. If they claim a right to your financial assets, we can request the financial records directly relevant to their claim. If the court grants that discovery, they will have to produce the bank statements, tax returns, and mortgage applications they relied upon, under penalty of perjury. We are going to let them walk right into a federal trap." We are going to expose every single lie they have ever told, on the public record, in front of a judge. A chill ran down my spine. It was a terrifying gamble. But as I thought about Harrison's smug face when he locked me out on my birthday, and Valerie's fake tears at my gate, the fear vanished. I nodded slowly. "Do it," I said. "Let them dig their own graves." Harrison did exactly what Sullivan predicted. Fueled by a toxic mixture of desperation, greed, and the false validation from Aunt Beatrice's Facebook mob, my father found a lawyer. He didn't just find any lawyer. Since my parents were completely bankrupt, no reputable firm would take their ridiculous case on contingency. Instead, Harrison somehow managed to secure a high-interest loan from a shady, underworld lender to hire a sleazy, aggressive ambulance chaser named Baxter. Baxter was famous in our city for filing frivolous lawsuits and bullying people into quick out-of-court settlements. 3 days later, I was formally served with a massive stack of legal documents at my office. Harrison and Valerie were officially suing me for $3 million. They claimed breach of implied contract, unjust enrichment, and elder abuse. They filed an emergency injunction demanding the court freeze all of my personal and business assets, including my $2 million estate, claiming it was a jointly owned family asset that I was attempting to steal. The strategy was obvious. Baxter knew they had no real legal standing. The goal was to freeze my bank accounts, paralyze my real estate development firm, and suffocate me financially until I panicked and offered them a massive cash settlement just to make the nightmare end. It was textbook extortion masked as a civil lawsuit. When the news of the lawsuit hit the public record, the flying monkeys cheered. Aunt Beatrice posted another long rant celebrating that justice was finally coming for the ungrateful son. My phone rang off the hook with nervous investors. Naomi had to personally visit our lenders to assure them the situation was under control. It was incredibly stressful, and there were nights I sat alone in my massive, quiet house, wondering if I had made a terrible mistake by not just paying them off to disappear. Baxter reached out to Sullivan almost immediately. He offered a generous settlement offer. If I paid Harrison $1.5 million and transferred the deed of a smaller rental property to them, they would drop the lawsuit and issue a public apology clearing my name. They wanted me to buy my own freedom from their lies. I sat in Sullivan's office when the offer came in. Sullivan read the email aloud, a faint smirk on his face. "Well, Silas, you can write a check right now and this all goes away. It would save your zoning deal from any more delays. What do you say?" I thought about the black trash bags on the lawn. I thought about the basement cot. I thought about the 100-hour weeks while Declan played video games. I looked Sullivan in the eye. "Decline the offer. Tell them we will see them in court. Tell them we are requesting full, expedited financial discovery." Sullivan's smile widened into a predatory grin. "Excellent choice. I have already subpoenaed their offshore crypto accounts and their past 10 years of federal tax returns. It is time to go hunting." If you are loving this story and want to see this toxic family get absolutely destroyed in court, write the word win in the comments right now. The word means a win, and I will personally heart and reply to everyone who writes the word win to show you watched this far. The weeks leading up to the hearing were a blur of intense preparation. Sullivan and his team of forensic accountants worked around the clock, tearing through the massive pile of financial documents Harrison and Valerie were forced to provide during the discovery phase. What they found was so staggering, so deeply criminal, that even Sullivan was genuinely surprised. The day of the hearing finally arrived. It was a cold, overcast morning. I put on my best tailored suit, the dark fabric acting as a suit of armor. I drove my SUV to the downtown courthouse, my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drum in my chest. When I walked through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom, they were already there. Harrison was wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, trying to look imposing and authoritative. Valerie was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, already playing the role of the frail, abused mother. Declan was sitting slouched in the gallery behind them, looking bored and arrogant, as if he were just waiting for a massive check to clear. Baxter, their sleazy lawyer, shot me a highly confident, condescending smirk as I walked down the aisle. Harrison caught my eye and mouthed the words, "You are finished." I did not react. I simply walked over to the defense table, pulled out my chair, and sat down next to Sullivan. Sullivan calmly opened his heavy leather briefcase and pulled out a massive, 4-inch thick binder. He set it gently on the table. The loud thud echoed in the quiet courtroom. "Let them have their moment, Silas," Sullivan whispered to me, not taking his eyes off the judge's empty bench. "Because in about 10 minutes, their entire world is going to end." The bailiff announced the arrival of the judge. Everyone stood up. The trap was set, the door was locked, and Harrison had no idea he was standing right on the trapdoor. Judge Caldwell was a seasoned, no-nonsense veteran of the civil court system. He was a man in his late 60s with piercing eyes and a reputation for aggressively tearing through legal nonsense. He took his seat at the high bench, adjusted his reading glasses, and stared down at the massive pile of paperwork related to our case. "Let us get started," Judge Caldwell sighed, his voice echoing loudly in the wood-paneled room. "Mr. Baxter, you filed an emergency injunction to freeze the assets of the defendant, Silas, claiming extreme financial hardship and asserting that his properties are, quote, family assets. The floor is yours. Make it quick." Baxter practically leaped out of his chair, adjusting his cheap tie. "Yes, Your Honor. We are here today because of a tragic case of elder abuse and financial manipulation. My clients, Harrison and Valerie, generously provided housing, food, and endless support for their son for 30 years. During this time, the defendant hoarded his income, secretly building a real estate empire while living rent-free. He used the safety of his parents' roof to amass millions, and when he finally bought a luxury estate, he abandoned them to foreclosure and homelessness. We argue that his wealth was built using their resources, creating an implied partnership. We are simply asking for their rightful 50% equity to save these poor, elderly folks from living on the streets." Harrison nodded solemnly from the plaintiff's table. Valerie let out a perfectly timed, tragic whimper. Judge Caldwell looked thoroughly unimpressed. He turned his heavy gaze toward our table. "Mr. Sullivan, your response?" Sullivan stood up slowly, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. He picked up the massive 4-inch thick binder from our table. "Your Honor, opposing counsel's narrative is certainly a creative piece of fiction," Sullivan began, his voice smooth and commanding. "The truth is much simpler. My client is a self-made developer who paid rent and utilities to his parents until the very day they illegally evicted him on his 30th birthday. But we are not just here to prove my client's innocence. We are here to demonstrate exactly why the plaintiffs are bankrupt and why this lawsuit is a fraudulent extortion attempt." Baxter jumped up. "Objection. Your Honor, that is inflammatory." "Overruled," Judge Caldwell snapped. "Sit down, Mr. Baxter. Proceed, Mr. Sullivan." Sullivan walked over to the judge's bench and handed the clerk the massive binder. "Your Honor, contained in that binder is a comprehensive forensic audit of my client's finances. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that every single penny used to purchase his $2 million estate came from his independent commercial real estate transactions." Sullivan paused, turning slowly on his heel to look directly at Harrison. Harrison's smug expression faltered slightly. However, Sullivan continued, his voice echoing like thunder in the quiet room. "During the mandatory discovery phase, we acquired the plaintiff's financial records. We discovered exactly where their money went." Sullivan pulled a large presentation board out of his briefcase and set it on an easel facing the judge. It was a blown-up photograph of the secret mortgage document I had found 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Harrison and Valerie secretly took out a $150,000 second mortgage on their primary residence, Sullivan stated loudly. They did not use this money for home repairs. They immediately wire transferred the entire amount to an unregulated offshore cryptocurrency exchange managed by their younger son, Declan. Declan, sitting in the gallery, suddenly sat bolt upright, his face draining of all color. "But that is not the worst part, Your Honor," Sullivan said, his voice turning ice-cold. "Our forensic accountants dug deeper into the plaintiff's past 10 years of federal tax returns. We discovered a massive, systematic pattern of federal mortgage fraud. Harrison routinely falsified his income documents to secure loans. Furthermore, we found clear, undeniable evidence of severe tax evasion. They have been hiding cash assets, claiming fraudulent deductions, and funneling undeclared income through Declan's offshore crypto accounts to avoid the IRS. The courtroom erupted into a chaotic, suffocating silence. Baxter's jaw literally dropped open. He looked at Harrison with an expression of pure, unadulterated horror. Baxter knew he was defending a weak civil case. He had absolutely no idea his clients had handed opposing counsel a roadmap to their own federal crimes. You cannot use that," Harrison shouted, leaping out of his chair, his face red and sweating profusely. "That has nothing to do with Silas's house. He stole from us." Judge Caldwell slammed his wooden gavel down with terrifying force. The loud crack echoed like a gunshot. "Sit down and shut your mouth, Mr. Harrison," Judge Caldwell roared, leaning aggressively over the bench. "I have been on this bench for 30 years. I have rarely seen a more despicable, trumpery lawsuit designed to extort a successful child." The judge rapidly flipped through the first few pages of Sullivan's forensic binder. His eyes widened slightly as he read the undeniable financial evidence. "Not only is this injunction denied," Judge Caldwell announced, his voice filled with overwhelming disgust, "but this entire lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Mr. Sullivan, you will submit a formal motion for legal fees, and I will mandate the plaintiffs pay every single cent of your client's legal costs." Baxter slumped into his chair, rubbing his face in his hands. His career was severely damaged. Furthermore, Judge Caldwell continued, locking eyes with a trembling Harrison, "As an officer of the court, I am legally obligated to report undeniable evidence of severe financial crimes. I have already forwarded this entire forensic binder to the regional director of the Internal Revenue Service and the federal prosecutor's office." The color vanished entirely from Harrison's face. Valerie let out a genuine, piercing scream of terror. The trap had violently snapped shut, and the teeth were buried deep into their bones. The immediate physical reaction of my family was something I will never, ever forget. It was like watching a building structurally collapse in slow motion. Valerie's fake, theatrical whimpers instantly transformed into genuine, hyperventilating panic. She went deathly pale, her hands gripping the edge of the wooden plaintiff's table so hard her knuckles looked like polished bone. She began rocking back and forth, gasping for air. Declan, the arrogant golden child who had spent his entire adult life acting superior, entirely lost his mind. He scrambled out of his seat in the gallery, tripping over his own feet, and rushed toward the low wooden partition separating the gallery from the court floor. "I didn't know," Declan screamed, his voice cracking hysterically, pointing a shaking finger directly at Harrison. "I didn't know about the tax fraud. He just gave me the money to invest. I am innocent. Tell them I am innocent. Dad." Harrison did not even look at his golden boy. My father, the man who had terrified me for 30 years, the man who had smugly thrown my entire life into black trash bags, looked completely broken. He was leaning heavily on the table, his arms trembling violently, unable to support his own body weight. His mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish, but no words came out. The realization that he was facing federal prison time had completely short-circuited his brain. Baxter, their sleazy lawyer, furiously packed his briefcase, snapping the latches shut. He leaned over to Harrison, his voice dripping with venom. "You lied to me. You used a fraudulent lawsuit to expose your own federal crimes. You are on your own. Do not ever contact my office again." Baxter turned and power walked out of the courtroom without looking back. We were officially dismissed. I stood up, buttoning my suit jacket, feeling a strange, profound sense of weightlessness. Sullivan patted my shoulder, a look of immense satisfaction on his sharp face. "Let's go, Silas," Sullivan said quietly. "Our work here is thoroughly finished." I walked slowly down the center aisle of the courtroom. As I passed the plaintiff's table, Harrison suddenly reached out and grabbed my suit sleeve. His grip was incredibly weak, his fingers trembling wildly. "Silas?" Harrison rasped, tears streaming down his deeply wrinkled face. "Please, You have to help us. We are going to prison. They are going to lock us up. You have millions of dollars. You can afford the best defense lawyers in the country. You can bail us out. We are your family. We are your blood. Please, son. Please save us. I stopped. I looked down at the hand grabbing my expensive suit. I looked at Valerie, who was staring up at me with wide, terrified eyes, silently begging for a miracle. I looked at Declan, who was crying uncontrollably in the gallery. I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a cold, empty void where my love for them used to reside. I gently but firmly peeled Harrison's trembling fingers off my jacket. You are a burden, Harrison, I said, my voice echoing clearly in the quiet, emptying courtroom. I intentionally used the exact same tone he had used on my 30th birthday. You drag down the energy of my life with your small-minded, parasitic thinking. I am not your son. I am not your ATM. I am the man you threw in the trash. Harrison stared at me, his mouth trembling, the absolute horror of his reality finally sinking in. Consider this my final gift to you, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Independence. I turned and walked through the heavy wooden doors of the courtroom. As I stepped out into the brightly lit marble hallway, I witnessed the final glorious act of my revenge. Waiting patiently in the hallway were 4 men and women wearing dark suits and serious expressions. The lead agent stepped forward as Harrison and Valerie stumbled out of the courtroom doors a few moments behind me. Harrison and Valerie? The lead agent asked, holding up a golden badge. We are special investigators with the Internal Revenue Service, Criminal Investigation Division. We have a federal warrant for your financial records, and we need you to come with us for questioning regarding massive tax evasion and mortgage fraud. Valerie screamed and collapsed onto the marble floor, sobbing hysterically. Harrison just stood there, completely catatonic, as the federal agents firmly grabbed his arms. I watched for only a few seconds. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I just turned and walked toward the bright sunlight pouring through the courthouse exit, leaving them to burn in the massive fire they had started themselves. Driving home that afternoon was the most surreal experience of my life. The heavy, suffocating storm cloud that had hung over my head for 35 years had finally, permanently broken. I drove my SUV through the massive steel gates of my estate, the gates they had tried to violently shake open just weeks prior. I parked in my quiet, pristine driveway, walked into my beautiful home, and poured myself a tall glass of expensive bourbon. The aftermath was incredibly swift and entirely brutal. The judge granted a permanent restraining order protecting me from all of them. But honestly, I did not even need it. Harrison and Valerie were completely consumed by the federal investigation. They were facing multiple felony charges for the mortgage fraud and the decade of aggressive tax evasion. Declan, desperate to save his own skin, immediately turned on them, offering to testify against his own parents to avoid conspiracy charges related to the offshore crypto accounts. The golden child had finally shown his true colors, throwing his enablers right under the bus the second things got difficult. The massive Facebook smear campaign orchestrated by Aunt Beatrice vanished overnight. Once the public records of the federal investigation and the dismissed lawsuit became available, the flying monkeys realized they had defended criminals. Beatrice deleted her posts and hid in her house out of pure shame. My business partners, realizing I had masterfully legally crushed a massive extortion attempt, respected me more than ever. The $4 million zoning deal was swiftly approved by the city council. I was free. I had protected my empire, and I had ensured that the people who tried to destroy me would never, ever have the power to hurt anyone again. Sitting on my back patio, watching the sunset reflect beautifully off the surface of my private lake, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the concept of family. Society shoves this incredibly toxic narrative down our throats that blood is thicker than water. We are taught that we must endlessly forgive our abusers simply because we share the same DNA. But that is a dangerous, manipulative lie. Blood does not automatically make a family. Respect, loyalty, mutual care, and genuine love make a family. Naomi, the fierce boss who threw me the keys to a dirty basement when I was homeless, was infinitely more of a family member to me than the people who gave me life. My parents viewed my success as a threat to their ego, and my money as a communal resource to be plundered. The best revenge I ever got was not sending them to federal court. The absolute best revenge was surviving their cruelty, thriving in the dark, and building a life so incredibly beautiful and successful that my very existence became a daily reminder of their massive failure. They wanted to use real estate to crush me. I used it to bury them. It has been several months since the dramatic courtroom showdown. Yesterday, I was sitting in my office when my phone buzzed. It was a text message from an unknown number, but the venomous tone was instantly recognizable. It was Aunt Beatrice, likely using a burner phone to bypass the block I had put on her number. Silas, the text read, "Your mother's health is failing rapidly due to the stress of the upcoming federal trial. She is incredibly sick. She cries every single day. She wants to see you one last time to look you in the eyes and apologize for everything before she goes to prison. Do not be a monster. Come see her." I sat in my expensive leather chair, staring at the glowing screen for a long, quiet moment. I felt a tiny, brief flicker of guilt, a residual ghost of the obedient son I used to be. But then I remembered the black trash bags on the lawn. I remembered the cold, terrifying motel room. I remembered Valerie's fake tears at my gate as she tried to steal the home I built with my own bleeding hands. Without replying, I pressed the delete button, permanently erasing the message and blocking the new number. But it did make me wonder if I crossed a line. So, I am turning the question over to you guys. Am I being too heartless? My mother is facing federal prison. Her health is failing, and she claims she wants to offer a genuine apology. Was I wrong to delete the message without reading it twice? Should I give her one final chance to clear the air? Or was completely walking away the only right move? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments below. You guys are the jury on this one. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to my story today. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to protect your own peace and your own future, you are absolutely not alone. Hit that like button to show your support, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. Stay strong, protect your boundaries, and I will see you all in the next video.